You know, there's a certain kind of silence that only settles in an old house when the people inside it are lying to themselves. It's heavier, slower, like the walls are trying to warn you. I felt that silence the night my daughter and her husband tried to rewrite the future I'd spent decades shaping. And the saddest part was how familiar that silence felt, like it had been waiting for this moment. If you're sitting with me now, stick around. Some stories don't ask permission to be told, they demand it. I'd been feeling something shifting in my daughter for months. A stiffness in her smile, a hesitation in her hugs. The kind of small changes you only notice when you've been around long enough to understand that love doesn't always evaporate all at once. Sometimes it thins out like old paint. That night, the house smelled faintly of dust and cedar. I was in my recliner, pretending to drift off, letting the quiet settle around me. My joints were aching from the cold, and there was that familiar creak in the hallway floorboards. The one I used to tell my kids was the house stretching its legs. But the steps I heard weren't the house. They were careful. Too careful. I cracked my eyes just enough to see the glow of a phone flashlight sliding under the door frame. My daughter's voice came next, low and trembling. "He won't even know, Mark. He leaves everything lying around. We'll just print a cleaner version and he'll sign it like he always does." My heart didn't race. It didn't even break. It just settled. Like it had been expecting this. Maybe that's the strange gift of age. Betrayal surprises you less and hurts you more. Her husband whispered back, his voice tight, the way people sound when they're not evil, just scared. "If he doesn't change it, your brother gets the house. We can't raise a baby in that apartment forever." There it was, not greed, fear, and fear makes people do desperate things. I listened to them move through my study, opening drawers they never used to touch. Papers rustling. A small thud when Mark bumped the desk with his knee. I could picture it all, every movement, as if the darkness made the room more honest than daylight ever had. They were looking for the will I kept in the bottom drawer. Funny thing was, even if they'd found it, it wouldn't have helped them, not one bit. That wasn't the real will, not the one that mattered, not the one they didn't even know existed, the one I'd written years earlier after a moment that changed the entire shape of this family. But they didn't know that, not yet. I kept listening, every rustle of paper landing heavier than the last. And for the first time in my life, I felt older than my age, older than my bones, older than my mistakes. Because sometimes the hardest part of being a parent isn't loving your kids. It's realizing they're old enough to disappoint you in ways you never imagined. I didn't let them know I was awake. Not yet. There's a strange kind of power in silence, especially when you're old enough to wield it without ego. I just sat there in that dim room, breathing slow, letting every whispered word stitch itself into my memory. The air tasted stale, like the dust rising from my open desk drawers. And underneath it all, I could smell the faint scent of my daughter's perfume, the same one she wore at her high school graduation. Funny how memories cling to smells long after the love in them fades. She sounded nervous, not wicked, not cruel, just a woman who'd let fear push her into a corner. "Mark, hurry," she whispered. "He could wake up any second." Mark muttered something I couldn't hear, but I caught the tone. Frustrated, shaky. A sound I'd heard from him only once before, the day he came to tell me he'd lost his job and didn't know how to face the world with a pregnant wife. I'd sat him down at my kitchen table, poured him coffee, and told him the truth I wish someone had told me at his age. It's okay to be scared. Just don't let the fear make you someone you're not. I guess the lesson didn't stick. A drawer slammed harder than they meant to. I heard my daughter suck in a breath. "It's not here," she said. "Where does he put it? He used to keep it in this one." Her voice cracked a little, and that tiny break hurt more than all the plotting combined. Because I remembered her at 8 years old, running into my arms with scraped knees. I remembered her at 15, crying on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. I remembered her asking me, shy as a springtime doe, if I thought Mark was a good man. I wished I could go back to that moment and say, "He's a good man, sweetheart." But even good men lose their way when life starts swinging hard. Mark's whisper cut through my thoughts. Maybe he moved it. Look in the back. People hide important stuff behind folders. Paper shifted. Something metal clinked. Probably the old brass letter opener my wife bought on our anniversary, the one I never used because the weight made it feel too much like a weapon. And somewhere in that rustling, something in my chest tightened, because they didn't know the truth I'd been carrying for years. The will they were searching for was never meant to be signed. It was a decoy I'd left in that drawer on purpose, a habit formed from living in a family where certain relatives, now long gone, would have done far worse for far less. The real will, the one that mattered, it had been locked away long before either of them even knew how deep the cracks in this family went. I shifted slightly in my recliner. Not enough to alert them, but enough for the springs to give that soft-grown old furniture makes when it's seen too much life. The footsteps stopped instantly. Absolute silence, thick as fog. Then my daughter whispered, "Did you hear that?" For a moment Mark said nothing. Then he breathed, "He's asleep. He has to be." I let the silence stretch a little longer, just to feel them sweat. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Clarity comes with age the way wrinkles do, slowly, then all at once. They started moving again, this time quicker, more reckless. I heard the wobble of the desk lamp, the scrape of the chair legs. They were unraveling. Fear does that. It pulls people apart thread by thread. "You said he wanted to update it anyway," Mark whispered. "This isn't wrong. We're just helping the process." Helping. That word landed in my stomach like a stone. People justify the worst of themselves with soft language. Helping, protecting, adjusting. All just different coats of paint for the same splintered fence. I heard my daughter sniffle. A quiet, choked sound that hit me somewhere old and tender. "I just don't want to be left with nothing, Mark. I've given up so much already." That line, that one hurt. Because she said it like I owed her something. Like fatherhood was some sort of debt I'd never fully paid. But I didn't feel anger. Not yet. Just a tired, familiar ache. The kind that settles behind your ribs when someone you love forgets who you are. They kept searching. I kept listening. And in the darkness of that living room, as the house creaked its slow, ancient song, I realized something that made the edges of everything sharpen. They weren't just looking for my will. They were looking for control. Funny thing was, the moment they found the real document, the one they feared most, they were going to lose every bit of it. But that moment wasn't coming tonight. Tonight, all they'd find was the decoy and their own reflections in the mess they'd made. And I'd be right here, waiting for the perfect moment to let them know the truth they weren't prepared to hear. I didn't confront them that night. Age teaches you the value of timing, the way a storm waits until the ground is dry enough for thunder to matter. I let them slip back down the hallway, closing drawers they hadn't opened properly, leaving the papers slightly crooked the way liars leave fingerprints they don't know how to hide. The house settled again, but it wasn't the same quiet. It was the kind of stillness that comes after someone breaks a promise they never said out loud. I waited until their bedroom door clicked shut, and then I took my time standing up. My knees ached like they always do, but that night the ache felt strangely deserved. The air in the study was different when I stepped inside. Warmer, disturbed, like someone had been shaking the dust awake. I could smell my daughter's perfume lingering in the air, a soft floral scent she'd worn since her 20s. It used to remind me of spring. Now it just reminded me of a moment I'd hoped I'd never see. I closed the drawer they'd left slightly open and rested my hand on top of the desk. The wood was cool under my palm, smooth from years of letters, bills, and birthday cards written on its surface. My wife used to sit here too, back when she was planning the kids' birthdays or writing grocery lists in her neat little handwriting. She always joked that families don't break suddenly. It happens one small splinter at a time. Back then, I didn't believe her. Now, staring at the quiet wreckage of my study, I felt every truth she ever tried to tell me. The decoy will sat in its usual place, still tucked into the manila folder with the little red star sticker my grandson had once slapped on it. I picked it up, opened it, and let my eyes skim the lines I'd written years ago. A version of the future I never intended to use, but one I kept around like a scarecrow. Just enough truth to look real, just enough fiction to confuse anyone who wasn't supposed to see behind the curtain. But the real will, that one wasn't in the desk. It was in a place only one person besides me had ever known about. My youngest son, not the one they kept talking about, the one they feared would get the house. No, I'm talking about the boy who'd come to see me every Sunday for years, without missing a single week. The one who, when his mother passed, stayed with me the entire night, bringing me glasses of water I never drank. The one who didn't care about the inheritance so much as he cared whether I needed help getting the groceries out of the car. That's the thing these stories don't always show you. Sometimes the people you trust don't fail, and the people you expect loyalty from stumble because their knees were already shaky long before they reached your doorstep. I walked to the back of the house, the hallway rug muffling my slow steps. The air felt heavier the deeper I went, like the house itself didn't want to witness what had happened. I pushed open the door to the guest room where my daughter and her husband were sleeping. A sliver of light from the hallway fell across their faces. They looked younger when they slept, softer, like the people they used to be. I stood there for a moment, not out of anger, but out of grief. Because you don't raise a child expecting perfection. You raise them hoping they'll remember the parts of themselves that were good. I watched my daughter breathe, her brow still slightly furrowed even in sleep. Fear changes a person's face. It settles into them like a second skin. I didn't wake them. I didn't speak. I just turned off the light they'd left on, closed the door, and headed toward the basement, toward the truth they didn't know existed. The basement smelled like old cement and forgotten seasons. I flicked on the light and heard the quiet buzz of the bulb warming up. Everything down there was familiar. Boxes stacked neatly, old paint cans, the toolbox with the broken latch. And in the far corner, behind a row of dusty holiday decorations, stood the old cedar trunk my father had given me when I moved into my first home. The lid was heavy, its hinges stiff from years of disuse. Inside was a small fire-proof lockbox, the kind people buy after watching one too many documentaries about house fires. I knelt down, slowly, carefully, and lifted it out. The weight of it felt different that night, as if it carried not just papers but years of memory wrapped around a single truth. The real will wasn't long or complicated. I'd written it on a quiet morning after a fight neither of my children remembered anymore. A moment when I'd realized that fairness didn't mean equality, it meant honesty. And the honest truth was that each of my children needed different things from me, even after I was gone. My daughter needed stability. My youngest son needed trust. And my daughter-in-law, well, she needed to know she was part of this family for reasons that weren't written on paper. The house? I didn't leave it to either of them. Not directly. I left it in a trust with conditions so simple that only the people who still cared about one another could fulfill them together. I knew it would either bring them closer or reveal exactly how far apart they already were. And now, after what I heard, the answer seemed painfully clear. I closed the lockbox and held it for a moment, feeling the cool metal under my hands. There was a quiet hum in the basement, the old freezer kicking on, the water heater murmuring. All the small sounds of a house doing its best to stay alive. When I stood up, I felt a sharp pull in my back, the kind that reminds you the years aren't shy about collecting their dues. I carried the box upstairs, slow and steady, like it contained something fragile. When I reached the top step, I paused. I realized this wasn't about punishment. It wasn't even about anger. It was about truth. The truth they'd have to face soon enough. That the document they tried to rewrite had never been the one holding their fate in the first place. And if they thought they were scared tonight, they had no idea what was waiting for them just beyond the sunrise. Morning has a way of pretending everything is fine. Sunlight slips through the curtains like it's trying to start the day over, offering second chances nobody asked for. But the thing about daylight is, it doesn't erase what happened in the dark. It just makes it harder to hide from. I was standing at the kitchen counter when they finally came out of the guest room. I'd been up for a while, sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to the clock over the sink click along like it had somewhere more important to be. My back still ached from hauling that lockbox up the stairs. My hands remembered the weight even more than my muscles did. My daughter walked in first. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, the kind she used to wear in college when she was running late for class. She gave me a soft, "Good morning," the same tone she'd used 1,000 times before. But underneath it, there was a tremor, a little wobble, like her conscience was standing behind her, tugging at her shirt. Mark followed her, wiping sleep from his eyes. He wouldn't meet mine. Fear changes a man's posture. It makes him look smaller in ways he doesn't realize. I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence breathe. There's a kind of quiet only older people know how to hold, a stillness that can shake loose the truth better than shouting ever will. My daughter finally sat down at the table. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, not looking at me long enough for it to be a real question. I stirred my coffee. It tasted burnt, but the bitterness fit the morning. "I slept well enough," I said, "though the house was a little busy last night." Mark froze. I heard it before I saw it, the slight hitch in his breath. My daughter's eyebrows tightened, just for a second, before she forced them smooth again. "Oh," she managed. "Must have been the wind." I let out a soft little laugh, the kind a man makes when he's not amused but finds the lie interesting. The wind doesn't usually know where I keep my paperwork. That landed like a stone dropped into still water. Mark sat down too quickly. My daughter's hands clasped in her lap like she was holding herself together by her own fingers. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was revealing. "I'm not angry," I said, because that was the truth. Anger is too young a man's game for a morning like this. But I am disappointed, and weary, mostly weary. My daughter's chin trembled. "Dad, we weren't going to do anything bad. We were talking, that's all." "Talking," I repeated, in my study, with my drawer open and my papers out. I turned the mug around slowly, letting the handle shift under my fingers. "Tell me, sweetheart, when did fear start sounding like justification?" That broke her. Just a small crack, but enough. She looked at her lap, eyes dampening. "We're scared," she whispered. "The apartment is suffocating, and with the baby coming, we don't have space, we don't have savings, and your brother has everything. Every advantage, every chance. We just wanted to make sure we had something." She looked up then, really looked. "We didn't want to hurt you." I nodded slowly. "I know you didn't set out to, but intention doesn't erase impact. It rarely does." Mark finally spoke. His voice was rough, humbled. "I didn't want to be that guy. I've been trying to fix things. I just keep screwing up. I thought if we could help shape the will, maybe we could breathe a little." That line, "help shape the will," was the kind that younger folks say without realizing it's the sharpest thing in the room. I took another sip of coffee and let the warmth settle in my chest. "Do you know," I said quietly, "that last night wasn't the first time someone in this family tried to rewrite my future without asking?" My daughter looked confused through her tears. Mark just blinked. I set the mug down and leaned forward. "Years ago, when your uncle and aunt were fighting over my mother's estate, I watched them tear each other apart over land and jewelry that didn't matter. They lost pieces of themselves they didn't even notice were gone. And I promised myself I'd never leave my children in that kind of storm." My daughter wiped her cheek. "We didn't mean to." "I know you didn't," I said gently. "But fear makes people repeat history, even when they think they're smarter than it." I stood up, slowly, because my back reminded me of everything I'd lifted, and walked to the hallway. I could feel their eyes on me. I carried the lockbox in from the living room where I'd left it on a chair. The metal was cool against my palms again, heavy but not with burden, with purpose. Their faces changed when they saw it. Mark swallowed hard. My daughter straightened, her breath cutting short. I set it on the table. The sound of metal hitting wood echoed with more meaning than I expected. "This," I said, "is the truth you didn't know existed." My daughter's eyes widened. Is that?" "Yes," I said. "It's the real will. And it was signed years before your fear started whispering ideas into your heads." Her breath hitched. Mark grabbed her hand under the table. "But before either of you open that box," I continued, resting a hand gently on the lid, "you need to understand something." The room felt colder, quieter, like the house itself was listening again. "You tried to control something that wasn't yours to control, not out of greed, I saw that, but out of panic. But the future of this family, the real future, isn't in that box. It's in how you handle what you're about to learn." My daughter closed her eyes, a tear slipping out. Mark looked like a man bracing for a storm he helped create. I opened the box slowly, the hinges giving a soft metallic groan that seemed to echo somewhere deeper inside them than inside the room. The papers inside were neat, clean, and unmistakably official. But before letting them see a word, I closed the lid again. My daughter gasped, "Dad, why?" "Because," I said softly, "this isn't about the paper. This is about whether you're ready for the truth it carries." She looked at me, eyes trembling. "We are." But I could hear the fear underneath, and fear, if left alone, becomes something dangerous. "Good," I said, leveling my voice. "Because what comes next, it'll show you exactly who you've been pretending not to be." And with that, the sun finally broke through the window, landing right across the lockbox like a spotlight. The real reveal was coming, and they knew it too. I kept my hand resting on the lockbox for a long moment. Long enough for their hearts to start racing in the quiet. Long enough for the truth to feel close enough to touch, yet far enough to fear. Morning light stretched across the table, catching the tiny scratches on the metal surface, the same way age leaves marks on the people who carry too many secrets for too many years. My daughter finally broke the silence. "Dad, whatever's in there, we'll handle it. We just want to know." I nodded, but slowly. "You will. But knowing isn't the same as being ready." I sighed, and it wasn't for effect. The sigh came from someplace old, someplace tired. This family has a history with money. A bad one. A history that turns love into leverage and trust into a weapon. I wrote this will to break that cycle. What you did last night, it told me that cycle isn't gone. It's just been hiding under new clothes. Mark looked down like he understood exactly what I meant. My daughter rubbed her forearm, the way she always did when she felt shame creeping up her throat. "Before I show you what's inside," I said, "you need the truth behind why I wrote it the way I did." My daughter frowned. "I thought you made it years ago because you were sick. After Mom..." I shook my head. "No, I made it long before my health changed. And not because of grief." I pulled out a chair and sat down so we were eye level. "It was because of something you don't remember. Something I never wanted you to understand this way." They exchanged a glance. I leaned back, letting memory wash through me like a slow wave. "It was the year your brother left home, the year you and he barely spoke. There was a fight. You remember the yelling, but you never saw what happened after. He came back that night. Not for me. For you. He had a letter, a long one, a real apology. He said he'd made mistakes and wanted to fix things with you, even if it took years." My daughter blinked, confused. "What? He never said..." "He handed me that letter," I continued. "Asked me to give it to you when you were ready. I waited for the right moment. But then life moved too fast. You were busy. He got married. And when I finally brought it up, he told me to forget it. Said he'd moved on from the guilt. That if you ever needed each other again, you'd find your way naturally." Tears welled in my daughter's eyes. "Why didn't you..." "Because," I said softly, "you both thought you were the ones hurt the most. And I didn't want to choose sides. I was your father, not your referee." Mark inhaled sharply, maybe realizing this family's bruises went deeper than any will could fix. "I wrote my real will after that," I said. "Because I realized something important. Kids grow up believing their parents will fix everything. But parents grow old knowing they can't fix some things at all. All we can do is try to leave behind a place where healing is still possible." My daughter wiped tears from her chin. "So the will, the trust, it was about us?" "It was," I said. "It still is. And that's why last night didn't break me. It just reminded me of how much work there still is to do." Mark whispered, "We're so sorry." "I know you are," I said gently. "And you will be more, once you see what you were so afraid of." I opened the lockbox again. This time I slid the papers out. Their eyes locked onto them immediately. Official letterheads, signatures, stamps. The real thing. The future they tried to steal a piece of without knowing the truth. I placed the documents in front of them, but kept a hand on the corner. "Before you read this," I said, "take a breath, because the fear you felt last night, it came from assumptions, not facts." They nodded. "Good," I said. "Now look." They leaned in. My daughter's breath shook as her eyes scanned the first lines. Mark squinted, moving closer. I watched their faces change. Confusion, relief, shock. Then something deeper, something fragile. Because they saw the truth. The house wasn't written to my son, or my daughter, or any single person. It was written into a trust that belonged to all of them. Every child, every grandchild. But only if they met one condition. They had to agree unanimously on what happened to it. Whether to keep it, rent it, sell it, or pass it down. No one person could control the future of that house. Not my daughter, not her brother, not even Mark, despite all his late-night fears. The house could only be a home if they made decisions together. My daughter covered her mouth. Dad, we nearly ruined everything over nothing. Not nothing, I corrected softly. Over fear. Fear of losing something you never lost. Her tears fell freely then. Mark's eyes shone in a way I'd never seen before. Not with guilt, but with recognition. You thought I'd choose favorites, I said. But the truth is, I've been trying my whole life not to. That house, it's not a prize. It's the last piece of your mother and me, and I won't have it break you apart. My daughter reached across the table, her hand trembling. I placed mine over hers, the warmth of her skin softening something heavy in my chest. I don't want the house, she whispered. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. You do, I said, more than any paper could show. Mark looked up. We'll fix this, I promise. I nodded. That's all I've ever wanted. The sunlight had grown brighter, filling the kitchen with that soft gold glow you only get in houses that have seen too many years and too many stories. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something loosen inside me. Not victory, not vindication. Something quieter. Something like peace. You see, I thought, documents can divide people, but the truth, if you're brave enough to face it, can bring them back home. I stood up slowly, joints cracking like gravel under old boots. Now, I said, I think we've all had enough truth for one morning, but before we go on with our day, let me leave you with this. They looked up. No matter how old your kids get, I said quietly, you never stop being their parent. You just learn to guide them with softer hands. My daughter squeezed my fingers. And if any of you watching this ever feel fear creeping into your family decisions, I added, give yourself a breath before you act. Fear whispers lies. Love doesn't whisper at all. It just waits. I gave them a tired smile, the kind a man earns, not practices. Stick around, I said. Next time I'll tell you about the day I found out who my brother really was, and why forgiveness comes slower to some people than others. Viral ready, fresh, human, unique. Grandpa Harry,